Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Life is harder than I like to think, but it's easy when you're by my side. No point in calling, you just have to see the fundamentals of our love tonight. Cause I've been looking at a photograph of you, and I've been thinking about all the ways you move. This isolation got me feeling like I'm moving my love. Yeah, when I wake up, I feel empty, not beside you. My whole life been searching just to find you. This quarantine, it hasn't got the right to keep us apart. Killing time, we got nowhere to be. You're sending messages I can't ignore. No contemplating, coming close to me. I'm bored at home, can't leave the house no more. But I've been looking at a photograph of you, and I've been thinking about all the ways you move. This isolation got me feeling like I'm losing my love. Yeah, when I wake up, I feel empty, not beside you. My whole life been searching just to find you. This quarantine, it hasn't got the right to keep us apart. You, when I wake up, I feel empty, not beside you. My whole life been searching just to find you. This quarantine, it hasn't got the right to keep us apart.
How y'all doing tonight? Hope everybody's doing real good.
Here is my dowry. Is it enough for love from the Magnum? Might I have your hand in marriage?
Please.
What?
There's too many
I got
pennies.
one case quarter.
A case caller.
I am going for a run in Portland, and I am going for a run in Portland, and it is a heat advisory warning, and it's very hot. But luckily, my neighbor have some blueberries for me to eat, and they're very refreshing. These are not blueberries.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Hello. I was in a hurry to go live, and I'm not ready. Give me just a second to get my cords all wrapped around the neck here. Alrighty. How y'all doing tonight? Hope y'all doing real good. Hey. We are making a chicken casserole and boiling chicken. Don't tell crazy chicken lady. Shh. So that's what we are doing. We're about to make us a chicken casserole for today. They're out cutting our grass, so pardon the noise in the background. Hope everyone's having a lovely day. Today's Wednesday, y'all. Hope y'all are doing real good. Okay, this is what I wanted to go over. Bring up this up here. Y'all can chit chat while oh, this cord's still wrapped around here. Hold on a minute. Okay. Just gonna have a little fun for a little bit and then send you on your way. Let me pull up my videos here. Your videos. I don't want creators. Let's see, I want to go to my channel. There was a couple of cases that popped up. I'm not doing true crime today, but there was a couple of cases that popped up that I'm probably going to talk about later on that are local to me that, you know, kind of woke me up out of my sleep today and made me sit straight up, if you know what I mean. But let me show you this first. Or I may save that for tomorrow and do that on Thursday. Where's my playlist? Bigfoot. Damn, that's not it. Hold on. So there should be a playlist here for that. See full, view full playlist. What? How did I not put it there? Wow. Okay, let me see. That's strange. Where the hell did it go? Visits Salem. Hey, honey.
Yes.
You know what I can't find?
What?
My, there it is. Why would I not have put that under Halloween? How weird. I found it.
Okay.
I found it. Skip ad. Wow. Okay, let's see. Sorry about that. Took me a second to find it. This is what I did a year ago. I thought I would share with you folks. I live in Winston Salem, the home of Salem College in Salem, North Carolina. So I did a little skit.
Yes, it's Friday the 13th, right before Halloween, and we are here in Salem to see if we can figure out what's in store next. Is there a clue here? I'll ask the book. We must continue on. We need the hair from a snail.
Hey, crazy chicken lady. Bark, bark!
Yes, we are getting close. closer to Salem. Where all the witches are from. Continue on. Snakes and snails and puppy dog tails. That's what little boys are made of. Yes! Oh, yes, oh, yes! Snakes and snails. And the hair of a toad, if you have it. But if not, it's okay. We'll improvise. This is where we study all of our witches' tales. Oh, yes, oh, yes. Sugars and spice and everything nice. Why, that's what little girls are made of. Oh, yes, oh, yes. Oh. Onward! We must find the toenail of a toad. Or was it her hair? I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've made witches stew. How about you? Oh, that's where we study. Our library. Oh, yes. Our library is full of books to teach us well. We're in Salem, North Carolina, but it'll work. Oh, yes. We're trying to find the perfect place. Onward for the hair of a toad! Or was it nail? Please beware. We must go. The goblins. They'll be here soon. Oh, yes. It's going to come together nicely, you see. Oh, my goodness. Ooh. The goblins will be here soon. Yes. We are getting ready now. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Here in Salem, where the witches are from, you see, where they are schooled and taught for you and me. Welcome to Salem, North Kakalaki. Yes, it'll do just fine. It'll do just fine.
I just don't think it's practical. For
Little skit I did last year. I'm in Winston. I lost my witch's hat. Didn't have one for our town's witch walk this year. Now I have hat mending. They did that here, a witch walk in our art district, or they're doing it at Halloween. I have to look at it up. Let me see. When are they doing that? My grandson's girlfriend sent it to me. Hold on 1 second. And I think that is fantastic. I want to do it if I haven't missed it. Hey, Sassy and Chaoses and Roses. Good to see y'all. Thank y'all for coming in. I appreciate y'all. If y'all don't mind hitting that like button while as y'all come in, I appreciate it. Let's see, where did she, right here. Yeah, right here. Let's see, what's the date on it? Witch Walk, October 25th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. This is the first one this year. Free Witches Walk. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Put it on the calendar. You already did? Awesome. Thank you so much. We do one every year. I also travel 30 miles to walk in the one in Pittsburgh. That's awesome. You never heard of it. You dress up as a witch and you walk. Right. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to it, especially in our art district, so it should be a good time. So excited about the witchy and pagan folk in the Winston-Salem area. Come join us. The Witches Walk, October 25th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the art district of Winston-Salem. Yeah. Okay, let's see what... I'll throw down a link if anybody wants to come up and chat with Gypsy today. That's about all I was going to talk about, was that and some, just get us in the mood for Halloween. I was going to talk about our town needs one with all the witches here. Let me show you one other thing that we have here. Go to my playlist again. Okay, let's see here. It's under Halloween. I need to save that one under Halloween that I just played. I don't want to show them my live. That's not the right one. Hold on. There's a few full playlists. Huh. It must be under... Where's the Winston Salem ghost tour, honey? I thought I had. Here it is. Yeah, I found it. Never mind. I hope this is the right one. That's not the right one. This one is. Okay. What do y'all see this here? I'm just going to share with you one of his stories here. He has a ghost tour here in our town. Am I sharing it? Is it sharing right?
20th century that the Stellan family lived in the house before you. And it was in the year 1912 that they welcomed into their family a baby boy by the name of Edward. And so it was to be that Edward Stellan was to be raised in the house before you. He decided to remain in the family home throughout a long career, first as a teacher and then later as a headmaster, what we would know today as a principal. And even in his retirement years, he decided to remain in the family home. And so it was during those retirement years, on a chilly, blustery February morning, that he stepped out here onto his front porch to have the day's first cigarette and to collect the morning paper. But seeing quickly that his newspaper had not arrived, he lit his cigarette and decided to take a stroll around the neighborhood. First, he headed down in this
dropping
direction,
the link
and when he got just a few doors down that way, he saw one of his neighbors and waved pleasantly good morning.
Video.
But that neighbor ignored him entirely. Well, now he thought this was a bit strange. He'd lived in the neighborhood his whole life. He'd known these people for decades. What's wrong with them today? But it was a cold day after all, and perhaps they were a little more concerned with their coat collars than pleasantries. And so
This
he
is a
turned
ghost
around
tour in
and walked
Winston
back
Salem.
right through where you're standing now. He headed down in this direction, and when he got just a few doors down that way, he again saw one of his neighbors and again waved pleasantly good morning. But that neighbor too ignored him entirely. Well, now he thought this was a bit strange. What was wrong with everybody today? And so he decided to return home here to the house to see if his newspaper had at last arrived. And as he approached his doorstep, he saw that yes indeed, his newspaper had arrived. He bent to pick it up, snap it open, only to read the headline, Principal Edward Stellan found dead. Police baffled.
I love this stuff too. I love it too. I'm glad that you've come here. That's good to know. And there's a lot I know that are in my area that come and visit. So that's fantastic. I'm going to play a couple more here that I think as he progresses in his ghost telling in the tour, it gets darker and scarier. The girl that has uploaded this name is Tara Campbell. If you'd subscribe to her channel, give her a like, a view. The whole thing is there on her channel.
And so the beautiful Philadelphia red brick mansion you see before you was built in 1895 by Benjamin Shepherd, a prominent local businessman. He lived here along with his wife and a young daughter by the name of Alice. And so it was on a Saturday morning around the turn of the last century that young Alice tugged on her daddy's sleeve and asked if they could play a game of hide-and-go-seek. And always wanting to play with his little girl whenever he could, he readily agreed. He put his face down into his forearm and began to count off his numbers, while little Alice went to hide somewhere in the enormous house. And when he concluded his counting, he hollered throughout the large home, "Oh, Alice, I'm coming to get you." Now, given that they had played this game many times before, he went searching in all the usual places. But little Alice was nowhere to be found.
He's
And
so good at
a
this,
lengthy
isn't he?
search that day yielded no results. And as the sun set that evening, you can imagine their panic as their little girl had yet to turn up. And it was with sadness the next morning that they employed a police officer to search the wooded area around the home. But by the end of the next day, little Alice had yet to be found. And so the family went into a very odd sense of mourning. They held a faux funeral. They buried an empty coffin in the graveyard. And things began to trudge along. The summer passed, fall descended, and the colder days of winter at last came to Winston. And the coal truck man arrived with a load of coal to keep the family toasty warm over the winter months. And as the coal man began to shovel coal down the coal chute at the side of the house, he noticed quickly that it was blocked. And behind further investigation, he soon realized that it was blocked by the body of a very dead and very desiccated little girl.
Wow.
It seemed that the coal bin chute had been her hiding place on that hot day of hide and go seek. And so they disinterred the empty coffin, they gave her a proper burial, a proper funeral, and the family went into its official state
This
of
is
mourning.
in the West End
Now, mourning
area.
in the Victorian era was a very
There's a lot of
properly
Victorian
regimented
homes
thing,
there.
lasting for a period of 1 year. And so it was 1 year later to the day that Mrs. Shepherd walked around the corner into that very living room, only to find Benjamin frantically and frivolously
With the
looking
what
behind the
lighted up?
furniture
A pumpkin?
and under the rugs and behind the chairs. When she inquired with him what he was doing, he simply
Crazy Chicken Lady. I know him. I know that guy. She says we used to have a guy who would come on his horse, all in black, with a lighted up pumpkin. His name's Headless Horseman. That's the Headless Horseman, Crazy Chicken Lady. Black, black.
said, "Why, I'm playing hide and go seek, of course, with little Alice." And it was all of a sudden that Mrs. Shepherd realized that Benjamin was playing hide and go seek with a ghostly little girl. Now, he lived in this house for many years after that, playing hide and go seek with Alice every Saturday. And so in more recent times, this house has become a bed and breakfast. No. And some of the guests that come here even now tell me that they too have played hide and go seek with a ghostly little girl.
What do you think of that? That's the Headless Horseman, Crazy Chicken Lady. I want to see the pictures. You'll have to bring him to class tomorrow for show and tell. Hey, Night Owl. We're telling ghost stories. You missed me dressed up as a witch. It's at the beginning of actual Sleepy Hollow. You weren't from the story, but it's just as spooky. Night Owl, might I say, you're beautiful. You're pretty enough to be the president's wife.
Snakes and snails and puppy dog tails. That's what presidents are made of. Yes, oh yes. Not sugar and spice and everything nice. Ooh. Let's continue on.
tucked in.
Oh, yeah, right there.
Yeah. I'll catch up to him. I'll write about him.
Cool.
Yeah, no.
Prominent local military officer. He lived here along with his wife, but it wasn't long after the completion of the house that Colonel Ludlow
Witch's brew for me and you!
went missing under very mysterious circumstances, leaving the rather large house to Mrs. Ludlow. And so, in those days, women couldn't just go get the normal kind of job they can today. And so she decided to turn the house into a bed and breakfast. And as it was then, so is it still today. And so she put an advertisement in the local paper and began
Don't
to
you
draw
love these
clientele
houses?
to her neatly appointed rooms
These Victorian
and her warm and
houses?
toasty breakfast. And it wasn't long before she attracted the attention of the Colatini family all the way up in Roanoke, Virginia. And they decided that year to vacation here in the hills of North Carolina. And so they packed up their things, and on that first day's journey here, they only made it as far as the campground on the state line between Virginia and North Carolina. And there, over a roaring campfire, all of a sudden, the two Colatini boys jumped up and began to frantically wave at someone off in the distance. The Colatinis looked to see who the two boys could be waving at, but saw before them only the darkness of the night. And so they inquired with the two boys who they were waving at, and they pointed off into the distance and said, "Why, that man over there, the one with the long gray beard." The Colatinis looked again, but again only saw the darkness of the night before them. Not knowing that little boys are sometimes prone to tall tales and flights of imagination, they thought nothing more of it. They packed up their belongings the next morning and made the remainder of the journey here, arriving on their doorstep late the next evening. And as Mrs. Ludlow answered the door, she seemed to somehow have an odd look across her face. She seemed to somehow be looking out past the Colatinis, beyond the Colatinis, through the Colatinis. She invited them in. Luggage was taken up to the room, and the two boys went to play elsewhere in the house.
Yeah.
And she invited the adults down to the living room for cheese and wine. And as the three adults began a conversation, some very strange facts emerged. It seemed that that night, of all nights, was the anniversary of the date that her husband had gone missing. And so, Mrs. Colatini revealed to Mrs. Ludlow that they had spent the prior night in the campgrounds along the state line. And that's when Mrs. Ludlow got the strangest look again across her face. It seemed that it was those very campgrounds where Colonel Ludlow had gone missing.
Colonel Ludlow.
And so, as these strange facts were being revealed, all of a sudden, the two Colatini boys came running down the stairwell.
Okay.
Mama, Papa, guess what? That man from the campground, he's upstairs and he has a train set. Can we play with him? And the two women looked up the stairwell. And Mrs. Ludlow looked over at Mrs. Colatini as a sense of shock came across her face. But this time, Mrs. Ludlow, she had the most sardonic grin across her face.
Chaos
And she simply said to Mrs. Colatini, "Well, I guess he's home at last."
Oh my goodness. Wow.
I hope you're enjoying this. This is labeled Winston Salem Ghost Tours. Tara Campbell is who put it out. And you can visit www.winstonsalemghosttours.com if you'd like to see more. Okay, I'm going to continue on. This is the Colonel Ludlow house that he was just talking about.
For a pop quiz, can anyone here name for me the street on which we find ourselves? The one headed in this direction.
Brookstown.
No.
Summit.
Summit Street. Yes, indeed. That is the official name of this street. And if you look around, you can tell that we are at the summit of the West End Historic District, the highest point in the neighborhood. If you look around, it's all downhill from here. And so, you can call this Summit Street if you want to. That is the official name. But this road is known by one other name. Just down in that direction is St. Paul's Church, and here on the corner is their memorial garden, their graveyard. And so you can imagine, in years long gone by, those church doors opening at the conclusion of a funeral. Out comes the casket, loaded onto a creaky horse-drawn wagon, and that wagon making its way down through the ruts in the road, here to the graveyard, to its final resting place. And so, you can call this Summit Street if you want to, but this road that connects the church to its graveyard, this one, or any like it anywhere in the world, historically known as Casket Road.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, well, if you are familiar with Winston at all, surely you're familiar that just a few blocks over that way is Salem College. Now, Salem College was established in 1772 as a school for girls. And over its many years, it has graduated some of the area's finest young ladies, preparing them to enter careers such as nursing or teaching. And so, over those many years, as you can also well imagine, a school for girls would have attracted its fair share of attention from the young men about town. And so, our story begins 100 years into the school's history in 1872, when two young local boys by the name of Tobias and Dudley were sitting along the fence row, watching the young ladies walking back and forth from class to class, perhaps dreaming of some future wife. And so, the two boys, the best of friends, caught the eye of one particularly pretty young lady by the name of Abigail. And so, both men's hearts went a-fluttering. And so, what began as a friendship soon became a bit of a friendly, romantic rivalry. And so, what started as a romantic rivalry soon became just out-and-out enemies, as each boy fought for the affections, the hand of young Abigail. And so, she knew that she could only take the hand of one boy.
This guy's creepy,
and so,
isn't he?
What do boys in the late 1800s do to settle a romantic dispute?
They fight about it.
How did they fight about it?
Jousting.
They have a duel.
Duel.
Now, given the duels were very illegal in those days, they couldn't just come out here onto the edge of town to the wooded area and have it out. No, the sheriff in town, he had a very good ear for every man's gun. He knew if Old Man Johnson was up on the lake shooting at duck, or if Old Man Federer was down at the low pond shooting at deer. And so, they needed to find a place of privacy, of security. And so they stumbled upon this barn, or stable, that you see before you. And here, they decided to conduct their duel. Now, given this activity, several other young men from town followed them in eager anticipation. And as Tobias and Dudley walked off their paces, they turned and shot at each other. And when all the shooting was done, only one boy remained standing. It seems that Tobias would be the victor that day, as the mortally wounded Dudley lay bleeding to death just beyond that door. And so, given that it was an illegal duel, all of the boys rushed back into town, not saying a word to anyone, for not wanting to get into trouble. And unfortunately, it was several days later before young Dudley's body was discovered just over here. And so, his body was taken off, buried in the local graveyard. But our haunted history tells us that's not where his ghost remains. Instead, rather, it rose up and came back here, in the place of its demise. And so, in the years after that, people began to say this barn or stable was haunted of the ghost of young Dudley. And eventually, the sunsets took away Tobias's days. And so, he too was laid to rest in the local graveyard. But they say that's not where his ghost remained either. But that one pivotal day where he took a man's life haunted his ghost forever. And it too returned here. And so, in more recent times, a paranormal investigation was conducted of the story we've just told you. And what those investigators found was indeed the two ghostly spirits of two young boys residing within its walls. And so, take pictures if you like, if you have a camera with you, particularly these window panes, and as we maybe stand back across the street, up over the left-hand eve, for this is a building of heightened paranormal activity. Now, given that the investigators were investigating a specific case, it wasn't a real big surprise that they found the two ghostly boys residing here. It was the other cases that took them by surprise. Look up over that left-hand some orb or
I'm going to skip down to where it's dark.
Some type.
Y'all hold on a second. I'm going to skip down to when it gets dark, because I think it's spookier when it's dark. This is where... Stop it right here, okay.
Small piece of metal and cut open one of his veins and bled to death right in. They sell it, but it was a specialty item. A man by the name of August Vogel performed a makeshift autopsy, pronouncing the young boy dead of drowning aggravated by hypothermia. And so, not having a penny to his name, August Vogel agreed to pay for the autopsy services out of his own pocket. He even agreed to lay the young man to rest. And so it was the next day in the frozen ground of Winston that Thomas Elligood was laid to rest. And so people in this town thought that the winter would go on and on and on forever.
Happy Halloween.
But at last, the warmer days came around, the cherry blossoms opened on the trees, and spring at last arrived. And so did a package at the local hotel. A package addressed to a man who would never need it. And so, perhaps as payment for the autopsy services or for the funeral expenses, August Vogel claimed the package and tried to resell it. But it was a specialty item, and there were no takers. And so he took the package and put it out in his shed on the off chance that maybe in hot days of summer, August Vogel one afternoon walked into one of our local shops and saw before him a beautiful array of daguerreotype portraits of the townsfolk. And he inquired with the clerk behind the counter where they had come from. And she simply scratched her head and said, "Why, I don't really know. They were just here one day." And all of a sudden, he remembered his brief wintertime client. He went running back out to his shed, only to find the daguerreotype set.
Thanks for coming in, y'all.
Missing. And it was then that August Vogel knew that Winston had for itself a ghostly daguerreotypist. And so, if you ever go into one of our shops and you see a daguerreotype portrait from the mid-1800s, look at it long and hard. for the story we have just unfolded for you is true. But local, the next story we have for you may sound a bit familiar. And before you go thinking that all of our stories are from decades long, long ago, we always like to pull one story right out of the modern day headlines. And so it was just over 1 year ago, in October of 2014, that the police in a small bedroom community of Winston, not a 10-minute drive from here, a little town by the name of Clemens, they executed a warrant in what looked like a bucolic suburban home. But what they found instead was a nightmare by any stretch of any twisted imagination. What looked like a regular ranch home on the outside revealed to investigators a very strange home indeed.
Thank you,
Odd
Crazy
markings
Chicken
on the
Lady.
wall, things written in a language that no one had ever read before. The house was trashed, and in one of the rooms a satanic altar. They arrested a very strange man by the name of Pazuzu Algarad and charged him with 2 counts of homicide, having found 2 dismembered bodies buried in his backyard. Does the story sound familiar to anyone?
Yep.
And so they arrested him and questioned him, asked him why he killed the 2 men, and he simply said that he wanted to watch them die. He wanted to perform a satanic ritual on them. He wanted to watch their ghost rise up out of their dying body. He wanted to claim that ghost and get it to do things for him. And so he was put under indictment and taken off to the town jails in Raleigh while the investigators prepared a case for him. And even the most hardened investigators' stomachs were turned at the depths of the case. And so, just this past November, not long before he was to go on trial, the story took one last bizarre turn. In his jail cell in Raleigh, he took a small piece of metal and cut open one of his veins and bled to death right in front of authorities. Perhaps as he was dying in that jail cell, perhaps as his own ghost.
That's not actually what happened. He bit into his artery. He had filed his teeth down into points like a vampire, and he chewed into his artery in his arm.
Was rising up out of his own body. Perhaps he could see it rising up, knowing that that ghost, his own ghost, would be the last ghost he would ever try to conjure.
Thank you, Vicky. I appreciate you. Pazuzu Algarad. I'll put it right here.
Where you find yourselves now was originally established in 1892. Prior to that, there were a few houses out this way, but mostly this was just a wooded area on the edge of town. And so, it was around that time of 1892 that a young man was known in this very neighborhood by the name of Peter DeGraff. Now, Peter DeGraff was well known throughout the neighborhood as being a snappy dresser. He was known to be fast.
Do y'all have ghost stories in your
town? Fast with a bottle of bourbon, fast with a pistol, and fast with the ladies. He was what we would call today a playboy. And so, it surprised no one when in the spring of 1892, he began to go courting with a young local girl by the name of Ellen Smith. Now, Ellen Smith was a pretty nice, hard-working girl, the kind that any mother would be proud to call her own. And love was on the rosebud. And so, they gathered just over here in that clump of trees, being the Lover's Lane for the West End Historic District during the Victorian era. And it was under the shade of those trees that most of their romance unfolded. And so, throughout the
So it
summer
sounds
of
like this is gonna be a
1892, as this bustling little neighborhood went about its business, they romanced each other. But as fall descended on Winston and the days became shorter and colder, so too did Peter DeGraff's heart. Eventually, he sent a note to Ellen
There's a lot of
saying he wanted
stories
to break
here.
up, to discontinue their relationship. As you can imagine,
Oh,
she was
hell, not
heartbroken,
now.
cried in her room for days,
Share.
until she received a second note from DeGraff.
Sherry, just half a sunny.
Telling her he wanted to rekindle their relationship. He wanted to start over again. He wanted another chance. And would she please come meet him at their rendezvous spot? And so no sooner had she gotten herself cleaned up than she came out to meet him here. And it was among that clump of trees the next morning where they found her cold, dead body. Shot to death with a bullet hole straight through the heart. Now there was only one suspect, and Peter DeGraff was
really?
nowhere to be found. They searched through every attic and every root cellar, every flour barrel and every garden, but Peter DeGraff had vanished in the wind. And so, a few days later, Ellen Smith was laid to rest in a pauper's funeral conducted by some members of the neighborhood. And so the search for DeGraff continued, and he was eventually found north of here in a little town known as Mount Airy. And so he was extradited back here to Winston to stand trial. And so, not in the 38 years since Frank and Lucy had a trial of such salacious details been brought before
Check
the
this out,
courtroom's gallery.
Manchester Vicky.
And so, day
Read this
after
here,
day in a
Sassy.
media frenzy, their story
sounds cool.
splattered its blood and its story
You should
across
tour
the
it for
headlines
us.
of the paper. As evidence was brought against DeGraff, he still professed his innocence. But as piece of evidence after piece of evidence was brought against him, he still continued to claim his innocence. And so, it was eventually a piece of evidence brought against him, a very damning piece of evidence. A note was produced in his own handwriting, a note found in her breast pocket, a note with a bullet hole through it, indicating that it had been in her breast pocket when the fatal shot was fired. And on this piece of evidence, DeGraff was indeed convicted of his crime. And so, as Peter DeGraff stood on the hangman's gallows, and the hangman put that rope around his neck, he still professed his innocence. But as the hangman reached out to grab that lever, he at last confessed to his crime and fell to his justice with a clean conscience, if not dirty hands. And so, in the 38 years since Frank and Lucy, the public's appetite for public executions had waned considerably, and the execution of Peter DeGraff was to be the last public execution ever held in Winston.
Wow.
And so, with justice served on the side of DeGraff, those in the neighborhood began to notice that a ghostly figure of a beautiful young girl appeared among that clump of trees and throughout the neighborhood. You can still see her today if you look in the shadows of love. Now, the story that we have just told to you, so ingrained in our local folklore that we indeed have a song about it in the country music tradition. And you can YouTube for yourselves the ballad of poor Ellen Smith and see there for yourself the sad story and lyrical verse of love gone awry, of the heart turned to murder, the ballad of poor Ellen Smith.
Did y'all hear Susan Smith
The
got
street, you'll see a
charged
historical
for
marker for the Hotel
inappropriate behavior
Zinzendorf.
weeks before
Now, the
she's to
Hotel
be paroled.
Zinzendorf was a magnificent hotel that was built on that location in 1891 into 1892. Now, the Hotel Zinzendorf was named for one of our town's
The
founding
Hotel
patrons,
Zinzendorf.
a man by the name of Count Nicholas
The Hotel
Ludwig von
Zinzendorf.
Zinzendorf. What a wonderful name. Doesn't it just roll off your tongue? Come on, everybody. Repeat it with me. Count Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf. What a wonderful name.
Say that fast 10 times.
And so, mein Deutsch ist nicht gut. And so, it was.
The name of this hotel is Zinzendorf. I will be staying at Zinzendorf.
Hotel that was built on that location in 1891 into 1892. Now, the Hotel Zinzendorf was named for one of our town's founding patrons, a man by the name of Count Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf. What a wonderful name. Doesn't it just roll off your tongue? Come on, everybody. Repeat it with me. Count Nicholas Ludwig von Zinzendorf. What a wonderful name.
Say that fast 10 times.
And so, mein Deutsch ist nicht gut. And so, it was a magnificent edifice, a grand hotel indeed, and an ambitious undertaking for the end of the 19th century. It contained two very large shaken cedar-sided turrets, a 200-foot-long porch, and more than a dozen well-appointed rooms, as well as a full-scale restaurant. And so when it opened in May of 1892, it opened to roaring success. Everyone in town, visitors and locals alike, flocked to its tables and its rooms. All the way up until Thanksgiving Day
you, Crazy
of
Chicken Lady.
1892, when everyone gathered there,
I'll send you your
including one of our
raise,
town's
I
most famous
swear.
citizens, a man by the name of R.J. Reynolds, who was rumored to have shot the bird and brought it to that
Reynolds, you
celebration.
say?
And as everyone
Why
sat
don't we
around
know
and
him?
gobbled up turkey
He's
and
the
green
one who
beans,
always has the
someone came
cigarettes.
running out of the kitchen and hollered,
The one
"Fire!"
called Camel.
And everyone scattered. Now, people in those days had a bit more wits about themselves, and so they remembered to grab on their way out the door a few items, a pillow, a desk set, a lamp, or a chair. And so actually many items were saved from the Zinzendorf fire. But oh, what
Boys
fire
out there are
it was.
staying at
It
the
worked through that building,
Zinzendorf. You don't
burning an
say.
entirely wooden structure all the way to the ground in 2 hours flat. A man by the name of John Taylor, the fire chief, showed up with his bucket brigade. But what could he do against such a raging inferno? And so, John Taylor, the fire chief, he was a smart man, and he went and sought out the manager, who happened to have with him his briefcase and a list of the reservations from the restaurants, the guest registry from the hotel, and a list of employees on duty. So he took the list, and he walked around to the crowd that was standing around, gathered about where we are now, watching the fire, and he began to check names off the list, and was relieved when he got to the end of the list and found that every name checked off. Now, it was a tragedy indeed that the Zinzendorf was burning to the ground, but it was, after all, just a building, and no lives were lost during the fire. Now, the next day, just as a matter of course for the paperwork, they needed to send in some inspectors. And so the next day, 2 inspectors went into the smoldering rubble of the Zinzendorf, and what they found there will haunt our history forever. What they found in the smoldering rubble of the Zinzendorf was a very badly burned, very badly charred corpse. So badly burned, they couldn't even tell if it was male or female. And in the days before dental records, there was no way they were ever going to identify who it was. They didn't even know how the body had even gotten there. The Zinzendorf had long been rumored to have been built on top of an old abandoned graveyard. Could it have been that the heat from the flames had wrenched some corpse up out of its unmarked grave? Could it have just been some vagrant crawled in
If y'all would hit that like button,
to get out of the
please.
chilly November wind?
Everyone's trying to get warm.
And that mystery remains unsolved even today. And so, in more modern times, people would be willing to build right back over that property. But in an age more superstitious than our own, they didn't want to build where had been, at least for a couple of days, if not longer, someone's grave. And so it wasn't until the 1960s that the building you see across the street was actually built.
And the kind of
employees
gal
in
that
that
would
building
walk
today
in a graveyard.
tell
Hell
me that it's
yeah.
haunted of an unidentified ghost. Oh, they know whose body that ghost was wrenched from. They don't know the identity of the person. So they simply refer to the ghost that haunts that grave as the Zinzendorf ghost.
The Zinzendorf.
Dick to differentiate him from his father. Now, Dick, to say the least, was a difficult man, a neurotic man, prone to fits of violent outrages and strange behaviors. And one day, during a fit at his wife, he took that Joshua coin and he threw it into the ocean, and it was never seen again. But not before the Joshua coin and its association with supernatural power had become legend here in Winston. And so, the next time you need a spot of good luck, take your gold and tap it and think of the Joshua coin. And perhaps some good luck will come to you from the world of the supernatural.
Dude, look how creepy that house over there looks. Where's the one right in front of us?
Oh, I know. Isn't that the one we gathered? Yeah, that's when we gathered at.
Whoops, yeah. It's hard to walk in video. I feel like I'm drunk.
Oh, it's hard to walk when you cover. It's like there's nothing in it. It's got that one in there. There's roots on guts. How weird is that?
Looks like there's just a couple more. The dead of night, just to feel connected to my family friends.
You know?
Should always be a dead.
The Taylor house.
Well, folks, here we are at the Taylor house. The house you see before you was built around 1890 by John Taylor, the fire chief, mentioned in one of our prior stories. And here he lived along with his wife and his 3 children. And it was on a chilly, rainy April evening that he was working in the parlor and heard a knock at the door. And when he opened it, standing before him was the soaking wet waif of a stranger, a man he did not know. And so, in those days, you were more apt to let a stranger into your house. And so he invited the man in, took him up to the guest room, got him dried off, and told him that he'd check on him in the morning. But when he went to check on the stranger in the morning, he found that during the night he had died. And so, not knowing who the man was, he went through his luggage to try to find some form of identification. But finding none, he took his belongings and put them up in the attic on the off chance that maybe someday someone would come to claim his things. And so he called for the coroner. They sent around a wagon, collected the body, and took it off and buried it in the anonymous section of the local graveyard, in an unmarked grave, and not gave him a funeral, for they knew not the man's tradition. And so, no sooner had the stranger been buried in an unmarked grave than the children of the Taylors began to complain that the house was haunted. And so, Every day the children would come to their parents and complain of ghostly happenings, of specters roaming in the hallways, but the answer from the parents was always the same. You need to get back in bed. I'm tired of these stories. You're letting your imagination run away with you. You know I don't believe in ghosts, and you need to get some sleep tonight. But as the summer progressed, the children of the Taylors continued to come to their parents and complain of ghostly specters among its rooms. But the answer from the parents remained the same. You need to get your homework done. You know I'm getting tired of these stories. I've told you again and again I don't believe in ghosts. And you need to get that paper finished. And so, as fall descended on Winston and the leaves on the trees turned crisped and sere, one evening John Taylor was working again in the parlor and needed something from up in the attic.
Isn't that called a
So
spirit
he
box?
ascended up into the attic, and there he bent down over a chest, and as he did, a shadow rose and took him over, and that shadow said to him, I am the ghost of Vincent O'Leary, the stranger who died in your guest rooms. Please, I beseech you, write a letter to my wife in Raleigh, tell her of my fate, and ask her to come and claim my things. And just as John Taylor stood up, the trunk by which he was bent, he turned to face the specter, but the specter disappeared off into the eaves of the attic. So he descended down out of the attic, and with quaky quill in hand, he scribed a letter to a woman in Raleigh, a woman he did not know, a letter dictated to him by a ghost he did not believe in. And silly though he thought it was, he mailed off the letter, and a few days later, a beautiful carriage pulled up here in front of the house, and out stepped an elegantly dressed young woman who announced that she was the widow of Vincent O'Leary, come to claim his things. She left a few dollars for a proper burial, gathered his items from the attic, came back out, got on the carriage, and disappeared off into the pages of history.
Wow.
And so, with a name and a few dollars, the city disinterred the stranger, now known as Vincent O'Leary, from his unmarked grave, put him on a funeral wagon, and took him back over to Raleigh and buried him in the city lot, with a name, marker, birth and death date, and a funeral for a man of his tradition. And no sooner had Vincent O'Leary been given a proper burial and a funeral than the children of the Taylors ceased to complain that the house was haunted. Never again did they claim that specters roamed these hallways. And never again did John Taylor say, I do not believe in ghosts. Ladies and gentlemen, that for this evening concludes the Winston Salem Ghost Tour. We hope that you have had a spooktacular time with us tonight as we've wandered through Winston Salem's haunted history. But we, like the ghosts that are all around us, must become the departed.
Did y'all like that? Okay, once again, I will drop the link to that there. Paste. Yeah, it's WinstonSalemGhostTours.com. I hope y'all all enjoyed that, and I've got to run and do my daily grind, so I hope y'all all have a great day. Thank y'all for coming. Hit that like button as you go out. Appreciate you. Share out if you don't mind.
Bye-bye. Thanks now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Your daily